This is CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast with Sean Taper, Joel Lindstrom, and George Dubinsky. This week we're joined by Dynamics developers Lucas Alexander and Jonas Rapp and MVP Jukka Niiranen to have a debate about citizen developers. Are they users empowered to use low-code solutions to solve business challenges, or are they out-of-control users creating problems that have to be solved by real developers? Join us now for the debate between Team Citizen Developer and Team Grumpy Developer. But first, a word from our sponsor. KingswaySoft is a leading integration solution provider offering software solutions that make data integration affordable and painlessly easy. Thousands of enterprise customers from over 70 countries and regions rely on KingswaySoft to integrate data with various business systems. KingswaySoft is a leading provider of Microsoft Dynamics integration software, including Dynamics 365, CRM, AX, Nav, GP, SL, as well as many other applications such as Marketo, Dropbox, QuickBooks, and Salesforce. Whether you need one solution or several, KingswaySoft works easily within the SSIS platform to make your integration processes as easy and quick as possible. Many of their clients have seen 3 to 10 times greater data integration performance after switching to the SSIS integration platform. We thank KingswaySoft for being a sponsor of CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast.
Well, this is a special episode. Feels like it's my Twitter feed come to life here. We have with us, I think, the most guests that we've ever had. George, would you like to do the introductions?
Introductions for everyone. I think it would be good that if everyone introduced themselves. So just let's go in alphabetical order. So we are building up 2 teams, right? So for citizen developers, so those who are in for citizen developers, and then we have upset developers on the other side. So I'll take the upset developers team. So and let's go around and introduce everyone. So first of the blogs would be Jukka. Go ahead.
Hey there, so Jukka Niiranen joining in the discussion, and I'm truly a non-developer, so definitely a citizen here, ready to punch out some of the devs in the ring.
Well, Jukka is kind of interesting representative of citizen developer, because I think for 2 or 3 years he managed to fool me into thinking that he is a developer. So he's probably qualified to represent citizen developers as the person who managed to fool developers into thinking that he's one of their own. Well, the next one is Jonas.
Yes, and I'm Jonas. I am definitely a developer. I come from that side. I tend to get a bit scared whenever I see a user interface. But in this case, this discussion we're having, I'm not really sure which side I might end up in when we close it out.
Don't say that. Don't say that. Lucas.
Hey, I'm Lucas. I'm a technical architect in the CRM world. I think I'm definitely not on the citizen developer team here, but my concerns are not all strictly development related. I think as we talk it out, there will be a lot about deployment and operations and all that not so fun stuff from a development perspective. But I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Okay, and then we have Sean. You're going to introduce, well, I'm not going to introduce the permanent residents, Sean and Joel.
That's fine. I can run with it. So yeah, it's me, the Hobbit, and I am definitely on the citizen developer side. I can't code worth a damn. So yeah, I'll be advocating strongly. And then I guess we'll go to Joel.
I'm Joel Lindstrom. I'm the partial moderator here. And I'm leaning towards team citizen developer, but I sometimes have sympathies to the grumpy developers. Can we call the team grumpy developer George and the Dubinskys? All right, so this all came about a while ago on Twitter, and like I said, this is like my Twitter feed come to life here, because I believe it started with Jukka posting about a presentation that you had done in Finland for about Microsoft Flow, about citizen developers, and Chris Cognetta chimed in saying there's always room for one more citizen developer. And then there were comments from some others here about how citizen developers give them nightmares. So I said, this sounds like a good podcast topic. So Juka, what was to set the stage, what was the presentation you did about Microsoft Flow?
Yes, actually that was for the CM Saturday event in Oslo, Norway. And I chose Flow as a topic for my presentation, not because I'm really so familiar with it, but actually wanted to kind of dig into the current state of Flow and see what can we actually do with it today, because especially now with the next release coming up, the July release, whenever that's going to be, with all the integrated flows into the Dynamics 365 customer engagement UI, then that's going to be a question that people will sure start asking more about. So what's going to be the role of Flow then in terms of compared to workflows that we have in the XRM platform already? So that was kind of my reasoning why I started to then dig deeper into what's the current state of Flow and what you can do with it. And then, of course, I mean, the events had a business track and a technical track, and it was on the technical track my presentation, so I had to also then cover kind of target also the dev crowd's agenda there a bit, and then compare the capabilities of Flow to Logic Apps, and discuss about what's going to be the sort of admin controls and the DevOps story there. So yeah, I'm not going to go deeper into the content there, because you can then find the presentation from my blog, but I think that definitely Flow is going to be sparking up lots of that kind of discussion about what can the customers, or what can the kind of admins and power users of Dynamics do already on their own, and what's going to be then the where do we then need actual integrations done by developers when you want to connect applications like SharePoint and XRM, for example. So that was kind of the background story of where we started the big debate this time around.
Yeah, and then Lucas chimed in and said, "Y'all are going to drag, shame, coerce me into using Flow despite every bone in my body disliking it." Although I got to ask you, Lucas, doing a Google search today, I came across, searching for something about Flow, I found a blog post you wrote a while ago about using Flow to call workflows. So I mean, you've used it before.
Yeah, and I think that gives me a leg to stand on when I say I don't like it. I was very excited about Flow, right? I mean, I'd been a if this then that user from way back when, and when I heard that Microsoft was going to create an if this then that killer, I was very excited about it. And when I got in and took a look at it, I was a little underwhelmed with its capabilities as far as working with Dynamics 365 organization and things you could do. And so that blog post I wrote, I hadn't done anything deeply technical in a while, so I had been trying to do a lot of work with the web API and the OAuth authentication, and trying to connect all sorts of things to Dynamics 365 that I don't want to say they ought not be connected, but you don't see a lot. Like, okay, let me get Python talking to it. Let me get Node.js talking to it. And so when I came into Flow, I looked and I said, well, one of the deficiencies with Flow is I can't run a workflow. And I mean, just to put this in perspective, I mean, this was 10 months ago. So I know that Flow has advanced since then, but I looked at it and said, there's no easy way for me to run a workflow in Flow. There are certain fields that I can't access in Flow. There are things I can't do. So let me see how far I can push it with some custom code, right? Because I mean, I'm a developer from way back, and I've never had a problem that I can't make better or worse, I guess, depending on your perspective, with a sprinkling of custom code. And so looking at it and saying, okay, now here's how we can take Flow kind of to this next level of capability. And at the end of it, I was satisfied that I had figured it out, but I was really dissatisfied with what I had to do to just do something simple execute a workflow. So I definitely think it's an interesting technology, right? And I'm interested to see where it goes. But very much, 10 months ago, me was concerned about its capabilities and functionality. In the time since, I've developed other concerns about its use in projects, particularly enterprise projects. But I don't want to monopolize all the time here, so just pause.
Now I'm trying to remind myself. My mom's name is Florence, and some people have called her Flo. And I'm trying to remind myself when you say you hate Flo that you're not hating my mother. Okay.
No, I don't know your mother, so
She's a lovely
I'm sure
woman.
she's a perfectly pleasant lady.
And then Jonas threw down with the citizen developer is my eternal enemy. Those are hard words, Jonas. Who are these citizen developers that are your enemies?
Those are words of, harsh words, since I'm getting scared. And the reason I do that is, as Lucas says, the platform for Flow is getting even better and better day by day. And that scares me, because then they can accomplish even more. And I have to be really confident that when I have designed a system, I shouldn't have any pitfalls in it that could be used. That someone creates this flow that fix the data this and that way, and then they shouldn't have been able to do that, because you can't do it in the UI, and then suddenly it's possible by using Flow. So it opens up a lot of more possible sources of error. I just know, my own first experience of Flow was that I tried this super simple get tweets with some keyword and post it to my Facebook timeline, which ended up in 3,000 Facebook posts in a couple of minutes because I missed some filter somewhere. And that's not a good thing. And imagine when that happens in an enterprise system. So maybe I was just burned by that first experience, but I think giving the power I really like that. From a personal perspective, I encourage that. I tell my kids, go look and see what you can do. How can you make your day easier? How can you get control of your life? And in the work perspective, how can you get control of what you do and make yourself more efficient? But in this case, I am responsible for the system they are messing with. That's, I guess, sums up my fear.
So, Mr. Tabor, could you define citizen developer? We're talking a lot about Flow. Let's take it a step away from Flow to this topic of citizen developer. What does citizen developer mean?
Right. So there's some basic definitions, but one that I think is appropriate is one by Gartner. So Gartner defines a citizen developer as a user who creates new business applications for consumption by others using development and runtime environments sanctioned by corporate IT. Now, that's a little bit leaning more towards a developer than a what I would consider a citizen developer. Citizen developer to me would be a business analyst, or even someone from the business side, being able to modify processes or enable processes without having to use code, whether it's a UI that is triggering code or creating code in the background. But they're not actually writing functions. They're not compiling code at all. And I think, to me, a citizen developer is important in the grand scheme of things. While they can be annoying, I can completely understand that take from a developer's perspective, or from a system administrator's perspective. But it's important, that role, because with more and more IT being outsourced, for example, the turnaround to get code written and the documentation that has to happen, the sheer overhead to get something done is much longer, and people don't have that much time in their business cycles anymore, and they want to be able to handle simple processes easily and leave the more complex, more complicated issues and projects to the IT org with a true developer.
Well, with that definition, though, isn't aren't things like business rules, advanced find, CRM itself, citizen developer tools? I mean, if you take it as something a developer formerly had to do to build data models, to lay forms out, to lay views out, to write a report that now somebody who's not a developer can do, where do you draw the line? Because, does anybody want to say that developer tools totally are bad?
No, that's not what we want to say, but let me just put it to Sean that what he's saying is that developers are inherently incapable of doing things fast and documenting them, whilst business users are totally in control of doing things fast, getting them right the first time, and documenting every single thing they do.
No. That's not
no, that's exactly what you're saying. What I'm saying that by enabling
Wait, George. That's not what I said. What I'm talking about is with IT being offshored in a lot of circumstances where the business user does not have control over those processes. I'm dealing with a project right now where that's the case, and it is incredibly time intensive to get work done. And it is not because it's with a developer, it's because of the outsourcing nature of the work and it going outside of the organization. It doesn't mean just because it's a developer. If that developer was onshore, I bet you would go very quickly, and they wouldn't need to do it that way.
So what you're saying is that citizen developer is the bastard child of outsourced development. Is that it?
In some cases, yeah.
Or cut IT budgets.
Yes.
Every company we work with is having their IT budget cut.
Absolutely. And more and more of that simple work that can be done through a user interface. I mean, look at XRM Toolbox. Half of that you could consider it being, if not more, you could consider being citizen developer tools.
Yeah, but also, one aspect of that is I am a citizen developer because I created stuff using XRM Toolbox. It's just like creating a Power App. I enhance what you can do, what's already in the platform by adding useful tools. But I think the key here is, as you mentioned, the simple processes. Yeah, who says what's simple? Where, as George said, where do you draw the line? And I think you tend to move the line further and further to make it more and more complex. And maybe there was a reason for having all that documentation and I mean the ground for why the processes look the way they do.
Mm-hmm. To me, let me draw some analogy. Okay, there are people on the road who pay their fees, got their licenses, and they drive cars around, right? Then there are pedestrians who's got sort of right of access by definition and by virtue of paying taxes and so forth. And then there is this strange class of people who install engines on their scooter engines, smaller scooter engines on their bicycles, and go driving around, which is, at least in Australia, that wouldn't be legal. Why? Because you're not licensed, you didn't pay for use of the roads, and effectively you're creating danger for yourself and for everyone around. So that's where citizen developers are, for me. They kind of empowered themselves, or they've been empowered by some other tools like XRM Toolbox, but they go around out of control, often out of control, creating unmaintainable legacy. If you go back to like early 2000s, remember Microsoft Access? Right? Great tool, great technology. Some of that technology ended up in SQL Server, right? But it's created an endless string of nightmare for IT people. Because suddenly you see all those little access databases that all look like my wine cellar database because they all use that template which came first, I believe, on the list or something like that. So everything looked like a wine cellar. But you ended up with like bazillions of those little databases all over the place, unmaintainable, doing their little functions, and then this person leaves or gets thrown under the bus, and you ended up with something unmaintainable, totally unmaintainable. In fact, I still have a client who's got database which is encrypted or what's not. We can't get to it. It's working. They don't want to drop it, but it really creates a set of problems for us. So to me, to sum it up, to me, citizen developers as such are not a problem. Like any people with knowledge are not the problem until they start using that knowledge, right? Citizen developers are a bigger problem because they create unmaintainable legacy.
Right. So, good news for you, George. Microsoft just this week released the Dynamics 365 connector for Microsoft Access. So you'll be happy to know that. So what I'm hearing you say, George, is it's not citizen developers; it's citizen developers without proper controls. Because looking at CRM, saving personal views, creating personal dashboards, all that stuff is citizen developer work. But you can't really do much damage because if you create 1 million views, you're the only one that sees them. But if somebody has too much permission to customize the system and change forms without knowing what they're doing, and I can see where Flow without proper controls could be that, because you might not be able to do things that your security role won't give you the right to. You can do it in a much larger scale and with other applications, so you can not just cause problems with CRM, but you can drag in Dropbox and Facebook and Twitter at the same time.
Okay, tell me what happens if I have personal view that I shared, say, with you, and then my account gets disabled. What happens to that view? Anyone?
I think you lose it.
It's orphaned. It's orphaned, and no one can change it.
But is it still available to you?
I don't know, George.
Is it available? It's available
now,
to
forget about
sysadmins.
sysadmins. If I share that with you, Mr. Hobbit, and you only,
right,
and then my account got disabled, right, can you still access that view?
Right. Yes, you because your user account is disabled. I can still access the view, but if you had not given me permissions to modify it, delete it. If you didn't, then I can see it, but I can never change it.
So now we ended up with the view that no one can change, right? No one can do anything about it. And then you call technical support and say, this view is no longer working. It used to work.
Right.
When George was here. But now it doesn't work. It's all your fault, guys. Not George's.
Here's the thing, Team Grumpy Developer.
Who's that?
It's a job opportunity for you. It's career. It guarantees there's a job for you.
No,
fixing the citizen developer stuff is you can make a good living doing that.
It's called extra uncalled work. That's what it is.
All right, let's get Lucas and Jonas back in here.
I think I agree with George about 1,000,001% on this. But the thing is, I also agree with Sean a little bit from what he was saying earlier about the role of the citizen developer and that knowledge. And on so many of my projects, it's always, hey, ask the SMEs, right? The subject matter experts, they know how their processes work. Don't just try to design this without involving them. So I think there's probably a middle ground here. I think to the extent that you could engage these citizen developer types subject to the proper governance, I think it can be made to work. When I look at Flow, I think there's a couple of different opportunities there. There's what Microsoft has said Flow is good for I'm paraphrasing, it's kind of like a personal productivity tool. Like if I'm a manager and I want to get an email every time someone on my team closes an opportunity, I can use Flow to do that. And that's great, right? That's the Lucas process. That's not the business process, and with the understanding that that's just for me. and that the whole business isn't relying on that working. So that's one use. I think another potential use is if you do have those SMEs or your power users or your citizen developers, kind of however you want to call it, or however they fall on that spectrum. Hey, go out and mock up how this process would work in Flow. Show me how it works, right? And then when you get done, we can figure out, does it make sense to leave it as a flow? Does it make sense to convert it to a logic app? Does it make sense to turn it into a workflow? Would we rewrite the whole thing with custom SDK code using plugins? I don't know, but I think that's definitely a way to engage them. My concern, yeah, absolutely. It's like a rapid application design platform, right? It's kind of like, I think everybody knew folks who would go out and they, years and years ago, you'd write something really quickly in VB, and you knew that you were going to come back and do it in something different, like a grown-up language later. Not ragging on any VB folks out there. But where I get really scared about Flow is you have things like the button apps or the approval apps, and you're saying, we're going to build, there's this approval process, and it crosses departments, there's lots of people involved, and then you're going to have a situation like George said, like, okay, the account gets disabled, right? I have no idea what happens in Flow. If you've got a Flow and I set it up, I'm a kind of mid-level manager, I set it up, and all of a sudden everybody says, that's great, we want to plug into that, and then I quit. I don't know what happens. I don't know how that's managed. So there's a lot of questions I have just about the governance of how that works as well that would make me incredibly nervous about putting anything business.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was just telling somebody I'm fine for using it for a text notification, because unless it's nuclear power plants melting down, you have to be there ASAP. Most notifications, reality, aren't mission critical, and so if you miss one or two, but I would not do a real integration with it or something like that. But getting back to citizen developers in general, I find a lot of citizen developer tools and innovations were made because they were tasks that real developers found extremely tedious. The XRM toolbox is filled with tools that before were very difficult, that somebody got sick of doing, writing code to do, and they created a tool to do it, making it a citizen developer tool. So I find a lot of the citizen developer stuff, like if a developer had to build every view in CRM, they don't want to do that. Like I've got a project right now where we have a developer loading in data from spreadsheets. He doesn't like to do that. It'd be much better to have a citizen developer use the import utility, bring it in, and let the developer write the cool plugins and portals and stuff he wants to do anyway.
So are we really saying a citizen developer is what we used to call a power user?
I think the thing is, it doesn't have to be a power user since it's open to anyone. And creating a flow, these, that you say, personal, supporting your personal processes, I think it's an equivalent to if you create your own macro in Excel. I want to do these functions, and you can do it. And I think it's fine as long as you don't mess with any other ones.
Now, can I just stop you right there? Yeah. The difference between Flow and Excel is that your time-consuming macro in Excel, whether it works or not, that's a different debate. And I can tell you how nations been brought down by Excel miscalculations, but that's a subject for another debate, right? Unlike Excel, Flow consumes resources. So if I ever get hired, by say Hitachi, they would never hire me, but let's say, for example, they make a mistake, and they do. And then they recognize the mistake and they fire me for no reason. One of the things I would do just before leaving, create a flow that sends this text message, 100 of them every 3 minutes to random 100 customers in CRM. Have fun locating it and switching it off, because not only that, it will consume all Flow resources that come with subscriptions. It will deplete your Twilio accounts, and it will do financial damage, right? It will take a while to undo that. So that's the difference between Flow and Excel. That Flow, since we're talking about Flow, I really didn't want to talk much about Flow itself, but rather about Citizen Developer. But since we're talking about it, Flow is the perfect representation of what can go wrong when citizen developers are out of control. And the biggest problem with Flow that in this environment, citizen developers are out of control, literally, right? Unlike, for example, Logic Apps, the next step up, which is Flow in controlled environment.
But isn't Flow? I mean, you have to have some kind of governance on the security and permissions of what your users or those folks that would be considered citizen developers have access to do. That it doesn't just because you have citizen developers, that doesn't alleviate the responsibility of those in the system administration to manage the application. I mean, there still is some responsibility there for the governance and for the responsibility that you're not setting your organization up for that kind of.
Worth noting,
I understand that.
In case anybody in the Flow team is getting nervous, they have made steps in recent months, like with the Flow Admin Center, to control policies, so you can control what services can be used, what data sources can be used, and what services, things like that.
They did, but I think they put in cart before the horse, and I think that's exactly what Lucas was disenchanted with when trying it for the first time. Flow to me felt, at least in the initial stages, as someone's internship project that someone looked at and said, "Oh, that's not a bad idea. We can kick Zapier butt. Let's do that," right? Little did they know. So what happened? They created this tool that is rampaging out of control, and now they realize that, hold on, we need to give enterprise some kind of control. So they trying to wrestle it back, but gin is out of the bottle. It's the same like with Microsoft Access. It's out of the bottle already, and XRM Toolbox is out of the bottle. So how you keep contain those developers? It's like they're not the bad thing per se, but it's kind of, I'm driving and I'm always on lookout for those scooter riders.
All right,
always on lookout.
This all started
Where
with
they coming in from
Juka's
next?
presentation. Juka, what do you have to say?
Well, I'd kind of like to bring out the other aspect of this and project from the more kind of direction that probably also Mark has been thinking about when building the Flow product as a kind of a simplified end-user UI for the Logic App side of things. So, because at the end of the day, we really need to be able to demonstrate the customers and the end users about what you can actually do with the huge ecosystem of cloud apps in Microsoft's and others' clouds. So, if we didn't have those flows that we could use for this kind of rapid demos and demonstrating the kind of what's the benefits of having everything under the same Azure AD authentication and being able to connect 3 or more different MS Cloud apps into a single process that kind of spans across different applications and not trying to do everything within XRM, for example. So I kind of think that there would be far less utilization of the clouds in also these than actual integration projects and these proper developer integrations. There would be less demand for those if we didn't have this quick kind of a demo tool for doing mockups, as Lucas mentioned, and building the very first version of what we need. So it's gonna be a very powerful tool for consultants like me who don't actually do the development side to then be able to communicate what's the potential of the applications there and then what it could be turned into when then developed as an actual functionality within a formal project and with formal security models and documentation and all that. So I think it's going to be very beneficial also for the kind of demand side for the real developers, not in the sense that they would be replacing real devs with the citizen devs.
I think a little bit of that's a double-edged sword, though, right? I mean, in the consulting channel, there's two things that have concerned me when people are going and they're talking about Flow. I've heard people say, Flow can support all these integrations, right? You know, Flow's gonna be your integration tool of choice in the future. We don't need all of these ETL packages we've used before. Look at all the money we can save customers by not buying these licenses. And I wince when I hear this, because I think about the effort I had to go to get Flow to call the workflow. It's like, now I've got this whole thing and I've got to build retry process and handle exceptions and, you know, all these things that existing tools already do pretty well. And are we, you know, going to go out there and position to prospects and clients, you don't need licenses for this other stuff because you got Flow. And I think the answer is no. I think once you dig into that, you would realize pretty quickly this isn't going to work. But on the other side of that, I'm also a little concerned that if you do go out and you say, hey, Mr. or Ms. Customer or prospect, let me show you this Flow I built, you've got to manage the expectations so that organizations don't think, well, why do I need these other tools? Right? And maybe I'm just looking out for my own job security as a developer.
Look, I think here I have to step up and sort of protect those poor citizen developers we've been bashing just a little bit, because in their defense, I have to say, Microsoft did create a clear upgrade path from Flow, and as of a couple of weeks ago, more than that, but around months ago, we've been able to import Flow packages into Logic Apps. And one can say that if you want reliability, if you want, create an environment that you can monitor, you can rely on, you can put SLAs on, Logic Apps is the next logical step.
Absolutely. And that.
So yeah, it's easy to manage expectations. The problem is locating, finding, and managing those little Flow packages. So to me, interesting. Like I came with the intent of bashing citizen developers, but I'm kind of now I see them not so much as enemies as children out of control, people who don't know better. And to me, whilst they probably gonna remain developers' nemesis, I think DevOps are the people who need to take responsibility herding those citizen developers.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it comes down to governance and standards. You have to have governance and standards. Without that, I mean, there is no citizen developer. There is no maintainable solutions within an organization.
And I think, how far do you take it? Again, Flow is a great example, but I've had, I did a test side by side I had a workflow and a Flow, both of which triggered sending an email when a condition was met. Flow picked it up and sent the email before server side synced it. And I had a case yesterday where a client had some workflows that stopped running because they disabled the system account that owned the workflows, so the workflows didn't go out. And we've all met developers who frown on using workflows and think it has to be a plugin for everything because workflows are a toy. So I guess, how far do you take it, and what do you tell your customers that are seeing, you got the owner of the company who fashions himself as a power user and wants to go in and change some stuff? What do you tell them?
No. Here's the thing, right?
No.
Like,
that was good.
I mean, gently no, right? Because he's going to write the checks or sign the checks. I think the challenge is you've got to communicate to people, and this is what I always say to all my teams is the best way to guarantee success of a project is to only deploy things that you've tested. So, and I use that as sort of a way of slapping the hands of people who, in the middle of a UAT are making changes directly in the pre-production environment just to make it pass UAT. And I say, you can't do that, right? You've got to go back to dev, and you got to push it up so that we have everything going the way it should, and we're not losing anything, because if you make the change where you did, then it's going to get lost and something's going to go into production that's untested. Or if you're doing that thing where you're deploying workflows to production, you're having to manually change the GUIDs after you've deployed. Technically, you're now running code in production that's been untested.
Correct.
I think the onus on us working with customers is to explain to them the risks inherent in running untested code in production, because that's what I think you would see in Flow. If you had something like that happen. Now, when they started setting up, you can move flows between environments. I feel much better about that than I did 6 months ago. I think there's still real deficiency in terms of my mechanism for automated deployment. Like I know, Jonas, you were doing work on scripting deployments from VSTS. I was doing some work on that myself just last week, and it's amazing. I can go and I can push a button and I can deploy up to all my orgs. Can't do that with Flow, right? And then even if I import a Flow into a higher environment, I still have to go in and do that kind of manual connection remapping business. So I have a lot of concerns about how that's going to play out over time. The answer, I think, has to be no, you can't just go mess with this stuff in production. And here's why. And I think you want to sort of evangelize that concept of you don't want to be running this untested, unvalidated stuff in production.
Right, but the good news with CRM is, or Dynamics 365 customer engagement is, that you can give them enough to keep them busy and scratch that itch. Like show them all the personalization stuff, show them how they can set up their own dashboards, stuff that they can do, or set up a sandbox that they can play in, go crazy with, and then, if they come up with something halfway usable, test it out and maintain controls there. But, you could say no, or you can say that's not advisable for good change control processes, but here's what you can do.
Yeah, I kind of see that probably the way that Microsoft would like the kind of evolutionary path to Flow to go is that it wouldn't be the consultants, it wouldn't be the pros like us that would actually build the initial flows, but rather that it would be something that the end users are hacking together and then come to ask us about, can we actually do this for production environments, or could we extend this a bit, and then we take it to Logic Apps and so forth. But then I also see that as a bit of a double-edged sword. If I as a consultant then go to a customer and build a cool demo with Flow and then show them how easy it is, and then start a discussion about how actually they need to invest 10 times more effort into actually making this something that you can run in a production environment, even though I already have it in my demo here. So it's probably, again, kind of a bit of an illusion that Microsoft has about the how far the actual kind of power users could go with this kind of tools. Same as with maybe Power BI, for example. So I think that's most of the stuff, most of the power that you have in those kind of tools is something that's the average kind of admin or a power user of an application could never figure out themselves. But for then guys who want to do cool mashups quickly or demonstrate the latest cloud applications, then they can be really productive with it. But I kind of see that probably it's going to take a while for Microsoft again to learn what's going to be the real target group for those tools and who are actually going to be touching them, and then kind of maybe iterate a bit on how they push the commercial message of Flow. Because I also see that there's been a change there compared to the how it was initially rolled out as a kind of a simple tool for like sending out email to yourself when there's a new document in a SharePoint library and that kind of very personal productivity stuff. But now when we are then starting to see it inside Dynamics as well, then it already takes it to the next level kind of discussion about this is going to be a part of the formal business platform that you are offering. So yeah, I think that lots of these issues that we are going to face are to do with the kind of commercial message that
that's
Microsoft
great.
has
So
around
here's
this
a question. What does it take to graduate from a citizen developer to a real developer? Where do you distinguish between the two?
I would say when the stuff you do shouldn't just be allowed to affect your own information, and your own processes. Flows and the citizen developers, they can do stuff to enhance and improve and make their own day more efficient. But as long as you start interfering with the enterprise business processes or how the general information is updated and so on, that's when you should be a developer instead. And that, I guess, has to be controlled by some sort of governance. You're allowed to mess in this your own sandbox, but not outside it.
Yeah, agreed. I would say when you're graduating past citizen developer when you're actually either directly affecting production by promoting it yourself, or you're compiling any kind of code, as opposed to using a UI.
I don't think. From what you should be allowed to do, or shouldn't really be distinguished by if you compile the code or not, or just use the UI, but rather what does it affect? And where I was going with this Excel analogy before George took over was rather that, when you create your own little macros to improve your Excel sheets, to make more visualizable or whatever, similar things in Flow. Yeah, do it. It helps yourself. It doesn't interfere with company data.
And nobody ever caused any problems with Word or Excel macros. So, all right.
There's a little bit of sarcasm there, I think.
So let me tell you about this before we... So, hold on. Before we call this debate or results of this debate, let me tell you about Excel. Fubar, remember the package that been the austerity package Greece was talked into a few years back, right?
Yeah.
And you know how they were talked into that package? They were showed calculations that demonstrated to them that countries in the same position that they were after the World War II inevitably went into recession, and to avoid this recession they had to take these and these measures. Well, as it turned out, that was the most expensive Excel mistake ever, because in their calculations people were copying and pasting, and they didn't paste 5 rows of data that clearly demonstrated that all those countries who were in recession were actually not in recession. Right? So this is the ultimate example, but it shows really well the danger of using citizen developer approach. So to me, the ultimate danger is creating something that will do a lot of damage, and it will take a lot of efforts to uncover the source of that damage and undo that damage, right? So to me, citizen developers aren't necessarily bad, but they need to be licensed, and they need to be watched, and they need to be monitored. So to me, citizen developers are okay as long as you have some kind of DevOps structure to tame those developers. And of course, they will be the subject of Speiseroutenlaufen and subject of physical punishment if they do something wrong. So if that's the citizen developer Sean wants to be, you're more than welcome. But remember, I will have, as a DevOps, I will have the last say, and the tools of punishment are under my command.
So all of you citizen spreadsheet developers need to go and let the experts use real spreadsheets like Quattro Pro.
Well,
all right. So
yeah.
Thank you everyone for being on the podcast. This is a record for the most guests we've ever had. Before we go, does anybody have any cool new citizen developer tools coming out for the XRM Toolbox or anything you want to promote?
No, sorry. Tell me what you need.
Yes, and then we'll tell you our hourly rate.
I think that...
Exactly. Perhaps some Extreme Toolbox tool to investigate all flows occurring in the system.
How about you, Juka? You got any conferences or anything you're going to be speaking at?
Well, nothing lined up for the citizen dev part now, so I did a pretty thorough investigation in the Flowland there, and kind of now a bit more ready to discuss it with the customers, and I think that's going to be a big reason why everybody should dip their toes into that those waters and like be aware of what are the kind of how much damage you can do there, but also then what are the new upcoming admin controls that are available there today. And keep an eye on those, because I'm pretty sure that we're not the only ones concerned about these rogue devs or citizen devs causing damage there. So I'm pretty sure that there's going to be the enterprise IT kind of brick wall that many of these tool flow demos are going to be now running into pretty soon once people realize how much they can do with them. So I'm pretty sure we're going to see some, even go maybe guessing that there will be more templates that Microsoft would actually be now building for us using these tools, rather than maybe just trusting all the customers to build stuff on their own. So who knows, maybe in like CRM version 10 or something like that, we'll get lots of features that are actually relying on these citizen dev tools like Flow and Power Apps. So looking forward to that kind of scenarios playing out in the future.
And Juka, Lucas, and Jonas, if you want to start a weekly Flow podcast, we're welcome to host that on the CRM Audio Network here.
Yeah.
And I just, before George, you say that, I just wanted to mention we alluded to this last episode, but we have it confirmed that we have our meetup at CRM UG Summit in Nashville for 1:45 p.m. on the 11th, and where we're going to be, we'll have several of the CRM Audio hosts, and also we're going to be unveiling Tip 1000, and we have Tip 1000 already in the works. It's going to be a good one. So if you're at CMUG Summit, please come see us there.
And before we say goodbye, I just wanted to turn the tables around a bit. And if you have nothing better to do a week from now, and you heading off to Microsoft Ignite in Orlando, I'll be presenting a session there, which is called Automating Your Dynamics 365 Day, which is, some of you may point out, is exactly a citizen developer session, because I'm not going to write any code on that one. So I'm just going to jump on that scooter, and being a licensed driver and all, I'm going to show the right way to navigate your way around Dynamics 365. And as of now, I think I've got more than 100 people already registered their interest in the session.
That's great.
So it's going to be a good one. Yeah.
So if each of them creates 10 flows that update 5,000 records, you're going to damage how many records?
Yeah, I'm going to make sure that my credit card is charged in full and is available to cover all those flows.
This has been CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast, with Business Solutions MVPs George Dubinsky, Joel Lindstrom, and Sean Tabor. This podcast is a production of Dynamic Podcasts LLC. Follow us on Twitter at CRM Audio. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, or any place else that fine podcasts are available. You can email us at voice@crm.audio with questions or topic suggestions. Special thanks again to our sponsors, Kingsway Soft and Alexa CRM, and thanks to Dale Simmons for providing our music.